pals, I'm here today to do a video I've been planning for a few months now. I'm really excited to chat about these books. So, earlier in the year I made a fantasy TBR video of 12 books and I intended to read them throughout the whole of this year and to review and then rank them at the end of the year. But I'm quite ahead and I only have 2 books left. So I did another video where I spoke about the fact that I love fantasy as a genre. Like when I find a fantasy book I enjoy, it makes me so happy, like probably happier than reading any other type of book. But I dislike like 90% of the fantasy books I pick up, like I DNF lots of them. And so I described all the things that I didn't like in fantasy and all the things I did and asked for recommendations, and you all came through, and there was 31 different recommendations for books that I hadn't already read. A lot of those recommendations were for like an author or a series rather than like a specific book, which I expect in fantasy because of course there's not many standalones. And yeah, the plan was to use that video to do a new TBR for next year, but because I've nearly finished the TBR for this year, in fact I would like to think I'd finish it by like midway through August, and also because I'm really excited for all of these books and I've had pretty bad luck with the list I made for this year, I sort of want to like not lose the, what's the word, like the drive. I've got the drive to pick up fantasy right now and I don't want to lose that by like holding this video off till next year. So I know it's an odd time to do a sort of TBR because, you know, all us booktube people try and make things fit really neatly, so like this would fit neatly into next year, but I want to start them now. And in all honesty, out of the 12 other ones I've mentioned before, I've, like I said, read 10 and there's already a couple that I want to finish the series of, so I think like combining the 13 I'm going to mention today and the ones I already enjoyed that I want to finish the series of, I think this will probably take me to the end of 2023, and hopefully by the end of 2023 I'll have read like loads of amazing higher epic fantasy series that I can recommend to you guys. So, did I say I got 30? Yeah, I did 31 unique recommendations and I chose 13. I wanted to choose 12 because it like fit into a year, but I like narrowed the list down as much as I could and just realised there wasn't one I wanted to bump, so I've got 13. And I haven't got any of these books physically yet. I had a little look and my library only has 4 of them, which is a bit disappointing. I thought they'd have more than that, so I will probably end up buying a lot of these books, particularly the older ones, like second hand, because I reckon I can get them as mass market paperbacks for like a few pounds each. So what I've done is I've put these books in order of publication date, and the reason I've done that is because based on all the fantasy I've read previously, I've realised that I have this sort of like conflict, okay? I want to read fantasy that's much more diverse and inclusive, which is what's being published today. Historically, a lot of fantasy was just like straight white men, and we had some women, but like mainly straight white men. Whereas now, yes, they do still dominate the like publishing world of fantasy, but there's definitely room for more voices. People are buying, you know, fantasy books written by authors of colour and queer authors, and like pushing publishers to keep publishing those stories, which I'm really glad about. But I've realised that I want that in fantasy, but I prefer the old style fantasy writing where the plot was much slower, it was much more character focused. I feel that modern day fantasy is much more like Brandon Sanderson, which is like really fast, the writing style like serves its purpose but isn't anything great, and I think that's what a lot of fantasy readers enjoy nowadays, so of course that's what's going to be published. So yeah, it's a bit tricky for me because I prefer old style fantasy writing, but I don't like that that's dominated by loads of white men. So I've put these in order because I thought it would be interesting, in order of publication, I thought it'd be interesting once I've read them all to like see if I do have more success when they're published a while back. So I have 6 books which were published more than 20 years ago, and I have 7 that were published like in the last 20 or so years. So the first one I have was published in 1987, and that is Daughter of the Empire by Raymond, Feist and Janny Wurts. This is the only book I have that's been written by 2 authors. I don't know if I've ever read a book that was written by 2 authors. Like I've probably read like a YA book or something, but I've definitely never read a fantasy book. I haven't read any of these authors individually, although I heard really great things about them, like of their time. And I heard Chris talk about this one over at the channel, Chris's Bookish Cauldron. He's like my #1 person for fantasy recommendations because we have quite similar tastes. I'm pretty sure he did a review, so I'll link it up here. And yeah, I mean, I'm not going to go into great detail about what all these books are about because a lot of them are fairly well known, and also like telling you the plots of like 13 higher epic fantasy books will take forever. But this is set in a world where there's this woman called Mara who's a young, untested ruling lady. She's called upon to lead her people in a heroic struggle for survival, but first she must rally an armour of rebel warriors, form a pact with the alien Chojar, and marry the son of a hated enemy. This is an epic tale of adventure and intrigue, a fantasy of the highest order by 2 of the most talented writers in the field today, and of course this is the first book in a series. So yeah, I'm intrigued by this one. Obviously I like that it has daughter in the title because it makes me feel like it's going to be more focused on women, so points for that. And then published in 1988 I have The Dragonbone Chair by Tad Williams. This is the first book in Memory, Sorrow and Fawn, which I think is a trilogy. It could be like a longer series. I've had loads of people talk about this one. Now this does sound pretty tropey in that it's like some evil type overlord takes over the world and there's this like secret league, and it's about this young kitchen boy who works in a castle who gets like unknowingly apprenticed to this league, and you follow his like coming of age story as he becomes someone pretty important, I think. But even though that is all quite tropey, I do quite enjoy the like young person who like gets trained and then realises they're pretty important and then goes on these quests. Like that's pretty much the Faster trilogy by Ribbon Hob. So yeah, even though this is like super tropey, it's a trope I really enjoy, and I've heard quite a few people who predominantly read literary fiction say that they really enjoyed this series and it's beautifully written, so I've got quite high hopes for it. And then published in 1992 I have A Song for Arbonne by Gavriel Kay. Now quite a few people mentioned Gavriel Kay, and most people mentioned Tigana, which I think is like his most famous book. I know I need to read Gavriel Kay because, again, lots of people who tend to read like more literary fiction don't read much fantasy, really enjoy Gavriel Kay. But whenever I read the plots of his books, I just don't feel intrigued. I don't think I'm a massive fan of what he does, which is he like retells actual historical events in his fantasy. I just prefer fantasy to be more original. So I'm not sure how I feel about that, but I feel like it would be stupid of me to not give him a go, seeing as so many people have said like, oh, if you tend to prefer like slow, beautifully written fantasy, you should definitely try Gavriel Kay. But a couple of people mentioned this book specifically because I think he's known for like not writing great female characters, but this book is focused on female characters. And funnily enough, Kristen, who has the channel Kristen is Fully Booked, who I've been subscribed to for a few months now and absolutely love her channel, is doing a read along for this book in August, which is why I was like, do you know what, I need to get this video up because I want to make you aware, like if you would like to try this book out, I'll link the video above. Kristen does mainly like fantasy reviews on her channel, and I really enjoy hearing her talk about all these books. And yeah, we're going to be reading it across the 4 weeks of August, and yeah, I'm looking forward to reading it with people who've read it before and really enjoyed it, and then also reading it with other people who will be reading it for the first time. And yeah, this one is based on the troubadour culture that rose in Provence during the High and Middle Ages, but this land is like a matriarchal society, and yeah, I think we follow like a few different people, most of which I think are women, so interested in that. And then from 1997 we have King's Dragon by Kate Elliot. A few people mentioned Kate Elliot and I wasn't sure which series to go for, and I was sort of put off this one because I'm not a massive fan of dragons as a plot device, which I know is awful, like take back my fantasy badge, but this one has better reviews, and other than the dragon thing, I'm quite intrigued by the plot of this, so fingers crossed. And if I do like her writing, I'm pretty excited because she has a couple of trilogies out, fantasy trilogies I think. This is about this kingdoms in turmoil. I think this brother and sister are like vying for the throne, and then 2 innocents are thrust into the midst of the conflict. Alain, a young man granted a vision by the Lady of Battles, and Liath, a young woman with the power to change the course of history. And they have to like find out their fates in this world where there's this big war going on. So yeah, again, sounds pretty like typical. I think the older fantasy books do sound much more typical because they are of course like what inspired all the books we're reading today. But yeah, I am excited to read all of them. In 2001 we have Kushiel's Dark by Jacquelin Carey. This is a fantasy book I've been aware of for absolute years, and the covers always put me off because I thought it was like erotica, and like that's not really what I'm interested in fantasy. And I've in the last couple of years heard people review it, in particular Chris over from Chris Bookish Culture, I think did a review, so I'll link that above. And he wrote about it and said like it's much more focused on politics, and the reason it has sort of the cover it has is because Kushiel so in this world there's this religious faction where the women are like sex workers, but they're revered because like the people they worship, there was a woman who was a sex worker, and she like was like, you know, like really close to their equivalent of like Jesus. And so sex workers in this culture are honoured, and she is trained to be a sex worker but also like a spy. So during her sex work she gets close to lots of important people and she gets information and you follow her story. And I've heard people like absolutely rave about this trilogy. I think there's a spin-off trilogy as well. So this is one of the ones I'm most convinced I'm going to enjoy, but I've also heard that it gets pretty complicated in terms of the politics, so I don't know, I'm going to be like confused, but fingers crossed I won't be. And then published in 2001 we have The Curse of Chalion by Lois McMaster Bujold. I've again had her on my list for years and quite a few people mentioned her. I know that she has, I think, some sci-fi and fantasy series, and I'm pretty sure this fantasy series is pretty long and also has quite some spin-off series, so I'm hoping to enjoy this one because then like there'll be so many other books for me to be excited to read. This is about a man who served as a page and then he's named to be like the tutor to this royal princess, but then I think they're like sent off to this place where like they're in danger and like shit hits the fan. So yeah, we shall see. So now we're moving on to the newer ones that were published in the last 20 years. I'm gonna like not talk about these ones very much at all because a lot of them are like very well known, especially this first one, which is The Blade Itself by Joe Abercrombie, published in 2006. Like, it's part of a trilogy, but I think again there's quite a few books set in this world outside of the trilogy. He's like, people call him like the king of grimdark. I don't really know if I've read any grimdark, I don't know, but yeah, I'm intrigued. Someone actually lent me this book 7 years ago and I never read it, so yeah, mainly because, yeah, I mean, again, like, I just felt like it was going to be really like manly, and yeah, not sure how much I was going to enjoy it, but I will give it a go. Lots of people mentioned it in the video and I feel like it's one of those books I have to try because everybody talks about it. The next one is Black Prism, which is the first in a trilogy as well, I think, by Brent. That was published in 2010. I think this is like a hard magic system that's based on colour. I do actually enjoy, from Brandon Sanderson's books, I really enjoy a hard magic system, and I don't read many books that have a hard magic system, so that's why I put this one on the list. This has really mixed reviews. Some people absolutely love this trilogy and some people really don't. I am worried that this one's going to edge like more towards Brandon Sanderson, and maybe the reason people love it is because of the magic system rather than the writing style, so we shall see. This is probably the one on the list that, like, if I was going to bump one off the 13, this one would have been bumped, but I thought, you know what, a lot of people mentioned it, so I want to like give it a chance. The next one is The 100,000 Kingdoms by N.K. Jemisin, also published in 2010. I've been put off reading this book for two reasons. I read the first book in the Broken Earth trilogy like quite soon after it came out and wasn't a massive fan. I thought the concept of the world was great, but I thought the execution was pretty weak and like the characterisation again was pretty weak. Like some of their choices just didn't make sense and I felt like it got quite messy towards the end. That may be a book I'll try and reread because I know people love the trilogy, but I was put off reading her other series, The 100,000 Kingdoms, because I knew it was about like real life gods and I really don't like reading about gods. But a few people mentioned in the video that actually these people, yes, are gods, but they feel like real people. And so I was like, you know what, I am going to give her another go because people rave about her so much. Then in 2011 we have Theft of Swords by Michael J. Sullivan. Michael J. Sullivan has like a few series that are all set in the same world but at different times. So I had a little look into like where was the best place to start, and I read on his website that he still thinks this is the right place to start. Now I think this is like a series where each book has like 2 of the books in it, so I think there's 3 books but actually 6 novels. And you follow these 2 guys called, I think, Royce and Hadrian, who everybody seems to love. I don't know if they're like sellswords or like trained thieves, something along those lines, and you follow them on their adventures. I think these books are supposed to be a bit more like easy read, light-hearted compared to like a lot of the other books I've got on this list, but I really like the sound of all of his other series and obviously I want to like read them in the right order. So these might be like a bit of a breath of fresh air in the list, but yeah, sometimes I don't enjoy stuff that's a bit lighter in fantasy, so we shall see. The next one is probably like the least well-known book off this list, but I included it because I've had it on my list for years and I've always wanted to read it. And when I was in the library the other day, I saw they had a copy, which really surprised me because this is from like a really small indie press. And that is A Stranger in Olondria by Sofia Samatar. This is, I think, inspired by books and by folklore. So we follow this young man who is the pepper merchant's son. He's been raised on stories of Olondria, a distant land where books are as common as they are rare in his home. He has to go to Olondria, and when he gets there, he is pulled drastically off course and becomes haunted by the ghost of an illiterate young girl. In desperation, he seeks the aid of a Olondrian priest and quickly becomes a pawn in the struggle between the Empire's two most powerful cults. It says like this is like beautifully written and deeply inspired by like folk tales and stuff. So yeah, I'm intrigued by this one. I think it's going to be quite different to everything else on the list, and I think this one is a duology, so like a bit shorter to get through as well. And then published in 2013 we have Red Sister by Mark Lawrence. Again, loads of people mention Mark Lawrence, and this is the series I think is an earlier one of his, so I thought I'd give this one a go. He, whilst being obviously a guy, he writes I think predominantly from like a woman or girl's perspective, and this is about a young woman who is trained to be a like nun assassin, and the book opens with like an attack on this convent where these nuns can all like protect themselves, and I think you follow her like coming of age story. I hear people absolutely rave about this one, so I'm interested. I would always rather read a young woman's perspective from a woman, because I just think sometimes men will like, I describe their boobs and stuff and I just don't need to hear it, but hopefully she's not going to be like an overly sexualised character. Fingers crossed, we shall see. And then lastly, this is the most recent one that is quite buzzy at the moment. It was published in 2019, I think self-published, and that is The Sword of Kaigen by M.L. Wang. I think this is inspired by, well, it says it's about the Kaigenese Empire, but I think this might be inspired by an actual history, I'm not sure. And this is told from the perspective of a mother and a son, and people say this is like beautifully written. Yes, we follow 14-year-old Mamori, who is trained to be a fighter, and then you also hear about his mother's storyline, I think from when she was young. People seem to love these two characters. I'm always a bit wary of books that are self-published. I don't know if that's like mean of me, but yeah, it always feels a bit more like of a risk. But I am going to give this one a go because so many people have recommended it. So yeah, those are the 13 books. Please let me know if you've read these books, if you think I'm going to enjoy them, and yeah, if you think like the series they're from are worth reading the whole series, and just any thoughts you have on the books I've included. And also I'd love to hear if you're interested in reading any of them as well. I could perhaps like try and make some of these read-alongs and stuff like that. So yeah, let me know down below. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video. Bye!